Welcome back, YouTube and Hoop fans. This is Athletic Academics with another episode of the Mr. Basketball Reviews, Episode 9, Season 1, featuring the 2020 NBA offseason, where we've been analyzing lottery teams from the past season and helping them find ways to compete for the following season. If you want to continue to see when new videos come out, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, and if you find the videos that you actually like, leave a like as well. Many of you have left some good feedback in the comment section, so continue to do that as well. And as I always say, I encourage you to share the videos around the basketball community. Who knows, maybe this thing can become something. If you're into the whole social media thing, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at The Athletic Academic and Twitter at Athledemic. So episode 9 brings us to the Charlotte Hornets. The story goes as always, looking at an overview and the highlights of the team from this past season, reviewing the team itself from the head coach down to the roster, analyzing the team financially and looking into any moves it can make in free agency in the NBA draft, and closing out with some inspiration we think the team can follow and finding out what our projections for the team are for next season. Season review for the Charlotte Hornets. 23 wins, 42 losses, missed the playoffs for the 4th consecutive season. Compared to the rest of the teams in the league, they were 22nd overall, 9th in the Eastern Conference, and 3rd in the Southeast Division. The record itself doesn't tell you enough about this team, so let's just jump into the season highlights. So coming into last season, many thought the Charlotte Hornets would be the worst team in the league, but they actually turned a good amount of heads and proved some people wrong. So before I jump into the story of this past season, I have to address something that happened last season, or lack thereof from last season, and that was the end of the Kemba Walker era. Kemba is arguably the greatest Charlotte Hornet that ever played for the franchise. He's the all-time leader in many categories such as field goals, points, minutes played. I'm not going to go through all of them right now, but you get the picture. But as we all know, he's a member of the Boston Celtics right now, and the Hornets had an opportunity to trade him before the trade deadline last season for some assets, and he rightfully walked away in free agency, and the franchise has nothing to show for it. The franchise was heading for a rebuild, and the front office was the last to know about it apparently. Anyways, you get the point. It was a missed opportunity. Let's just get to the rest of the story. So, the Hornets are rebuilding. They have a lack of a franchise player right now, and we don't have any indicators on who the next franchise player could be. The Hornets are a young team trying to find their way. They were actually the 4th youngest team in the NBA last season. They have young players who have the potential to score, but we haven't seen that yet. They had the worst scoring offense in the team last season, actually. And for the most of last season as well, defensively, they weren't good at all, as they were one of the worst teams in the league in defense. But even with that said, this team fought hard. They proved a lot of people wrong. Analysts thought they would be the worst team in the league, and they surely were not. They have some good talent that's emerged. Story of the year for the franchise, definitely Devontae Graham. A D-League player early in his career to now being recognized as one of the most improved NBA players that nobody saw coming. He led the Hornets in points per game and assists this past season. And then you have Miles Bridges, who's been inconsistent, but he's also continued to improve as well. They've got great draft returns from last season in PJ Washington, and the Martin brothers have been a terror on defense. But this coming NBA draft is going to be critical for the team, as they will have the number 3 pick. And the way the roster is, they should be in no ways trying to find the best fit. They need the best player available for them, period. Because this market struggles when it comes to finding quality free agents. Forbes has them ranked as the 6th least valuable NBA franchise this past season. And with a rebuild such as this, fans will need to be patient. But the returns so far are pretty good. So how did the Charlotte Hornets look this past season on offense? They were 28th in the NBA in offensive rating at 105.9. And the big story with the Hornets is that they're a young team trying to find their way. They have prospects and talent on the offensive end that just hasn't shown itself yet. They were the least efficient offensive team, and they put up the least amount of points because they play the slowest pace in the NBA. And that's partly because you have 2 guards that have a lot of pressure on themselves to score. And they are not big guards at all, but they've helped keep the team afloat with their three-point shooting. But since they have that high amount of volume coming from three-point land and the slow pace, they don't get enough opportunities at the charity stripe, and they need that added versatility to their offense. So what can the Hornets do to improve their offense? For starters, they need to increase their playmaking and shot creating abilities. Players like Miles Bridges and especially Malik Monk need to step up now, because this past season, 6'1" Devontae Graham was 4th in the NBA in touches per game, just behind Jokic, Luka, and LeBron, which has contributed to some of the inefficiencies in his game. There's too much pressure put on him. But I will say he averaged 7.5 assists per game, and there are some opportunities for him to help put teammates in positions to succeed. seed. This team also could benefit from a lot of off-ball movement and catch-and-shoot opportunities. They were third worst in the league in catch-and-shoot opportunities, and I'm looking at PJ Washington and Malik Monk to really set the tone for that next season. This will help clear the lane and make it easier opportunities to score in the paint, which also is another big issue for the Hornets. There's no one on the team that I think will fill that paint presence, at least from a long-term perspective, so they're going to have to look in free agency or the draft. We said this a couple times earlier, but they need to increase the pace. Faster pace means more possessions and more opportunities to score. And as stated earlier as well, this is a young team. We're not expecting them to just change everything overnight. They will need some time to develop, but the clock is always ticking. They can't take too long. Now, defensively for the Hornets, they have their issues there as well. They rank 25th in the NBA in defensive rating at 112.8. The team was pretty abysmal on defense for most of the season until just over the last month of the season, they turned it up, becoming one of the best defensive teams in the league. They held their opponents to lower than 105 points per game, which was fewest in the NBA during that period. Now, yes, some of that was due to, on offense, the Hornets having the slowest pace in the league, but a key piece of this turnaround was the help from PJ Washington, the Martin brothers, and even Jalen McDaniels. Hopefully a lot of this can transfer in the next season, but a huge issue the team needs to address is their issues in the paint. They were second to last in the league in defensive rebounds, and they are one of the worst in the league in blocks per game and paint scored in the paint. And there's no center on the team that's going to be a long-term option to help them out in this issue. Now, we're hoping that late season surge in defense was not a fluke, because if not, this rebuild may not be as painful as many may have thought. They desperately need to address the issues in the paint, and I'm thinking that's either going to lead to free agency or the draft. The team did let some of their veterans move at the beginning of the season in Marvin Williams and Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, where they could go to contending teams and compete for championships, even though Marvin Williams just recently retired at the end of this past season. But if they can find some good veterans on the low that can help with the locker room and the culture, that would be a plus. Because if they stay the course and help this team to develop, they would be setting the tone for the culture of the franchise. And players value culture. Just look at the Miami Heat and Jimmy Butler. So speaking on culture, let's talk a little bit about the head coach that's helped leading the charge in that change, James Borrego. Now, I'll be honest, this is another head coach I don't know too much about. I know a little bit of him when he was an assistant with the San Antonio Spurs, but I'll be doing more of my homework on head coaches as the next season rolls around. So Borrego's been a head coach for 3 seasons, and part of that was when he was an interim head coach with the Orlando Magic a few years ago. But with the last 2 years, he's been with the Charlotte Hornets, and what I've seen from him, he looks like he's a pretty good coach and player development, as these young guys in the team are further along than maybe what some have thought they would be. And there are some guys who still need some more help, like Malik Monk, although he had a late season surge before the suspension he had. We're still waiting for you, my guy. We're not going to hit you too hard because we're talking about James Borrego right now. But back to Borrego, he is a guy that does get some good player buy-in. And although the team had its lapses in defense, he has been known as a coach that stresses defense and ball movement. The only downside I can see from him right now is that he doesn't have any years under his belt as a head coach. I wouldn't necessarily call that a bad thing, but it is something to keep in mind. The Hornets, without a doubt, are going to continue to roll with him, and I think he's a decent coach after doing some research on him. The Charlotte Hornets in their 2020 off-season roster. There's 4 players with contracts up for discussion, but one of them is a player option who without a doubt is going to accept it, and that's in Nicholas Batum. It hasn't been the most beautiful experience with him in Charlotte, but there's 1 year left. Bismack Biyombo has been a little bit of a disappointment. He did his thing in the playoff series with Toronto a few years back, got a good contract in Charlotte, but even as a traditional center, he hasn't done much to help protect the paint, especially for that amount of money he was given. Willy Hernangomez is a player that I may keep. He also hasn't given me much help in the paint defensively, but he is on the cheaper side and I do need depth. As for Dwayne Bacon, this is a tough and sad one because we've seen the guy score. He can hoop, but he's not consistent, and he lost his job in the beginning of the season when Terry Rozier came around, who moved to shooting guard because of the arrival of Devontae Graham. So he is a restricted free agent. If you really admire his potential, then you can match whatever offer he gets from teams, but I don't know what the market will be for him. But if I bring him back, it's not going to be anything extravagant. So let's talk about the Hornets financially. Starting with the league salary cap maximum, we know it's set at $109.1 million. The team has 10 active contracts next year that total $80.9 million. They have no dead money owed, and the salary cap holes they have is $49.1 million, which means the Hornets' total salary allocations come to about $130.1 million, or just over $21 million from the salary cap maximum, which places them 14th in the NBA. Now, the other financial piece is how they look in regards to the luxury tax. Starting with the league luxury tax threshold set at $132.6 million next year. We know the team's total taxable salaries from the previous slide was $80.9 million, and a team's salary cap holds don't account to the luxury tax, which means the Hornets have $51.6 million in luxury tax space remaining, fourth in the NBA. Pretty good for a rebuilding team, as there aren't any long-term crazy bad contracts, as being Nicholas Batum has that player option that we know he's going to take on, and that's just for 1 year. The team has to decide what they're going to do with Malik Monk because the qualifying offer comes next year, and this is a do-or-die season for Malik. Also, the team may need to address if they can play Miles Bridges and PJ Washington together. They have time to think about that, but one thing they have to think about this offseason is what they can do at the center position. I have a few ideas in mind, but there's one particular player that I would target in free agency. And that player is Christian Wood from the Detroit Pistons. Christian will be found on a lot of teams' radars this offseason after he had that great surge of performance after the Drummond trade during the trade deadline. During last season, he averaged 13 points per game on almost 57% shooting, 38.5% from three on 2.3 three-point attempts per game, and about 6 rebounds per game. But after the Drummond trade in those 12 games before the season ended, he averaged 22 points per game, 10 rebounds on 54% shooting, and 37% from three-point land. But see, the talent for Christian was always there, but the concerns dated all the way back to when he was an undrafted rookie out of UNLV. Scouts loved his talent and skill, but they felt he was immature, and they didn't love his shot selection. So he was a journeyman his first couple seasons in the league, then found himself out of the league and going to China, where he played a small stint and then found himself getting cut there as well. And he states himself that was the turning point in his career, to where he started to focus and work harder on himself. He was fortunate enough to find a second opportunity in the NBA, having small stints in New Orleans and Milwaukee in the 2018-2019 season. And as we know with Detroit, he finally had his platform to showcase his skills and address the prior maturity and work ethic concerns. So how does he help Charlotte? Number one, his offensive versatility. His offensive repertoire for a big man has been great, and he doesn't need to be your main focal point, as he's shown he can play perfectly off Blake Griffin and Drummond, who held the paint down, where he showed his uncanny ability to displace the floor from three-point range. He has great touch, hands, and finesse for a big man, and he's very athletic. And although he still needs to work on his defense, he's shown great ability to be a shot blocker. He does come with some concerns as he's not the strongest player, and as good as he's shown the ability to work around other players and their skills, but if he's going to get a lucrative contract this offseason, he needs to improve his playmaking and passing skills to help other teammates elevate and be in positions to succeed. And a big thing teams are worried about now is if that was a small sample size, is that the real Christian Wood? If he gets a bigger contract, will he still perform the way he has been? Or will the work ethic drain? But if this is the real deal, I would offer him a 4-year deal between $56 to $68 million or $14 to $17 million a year. So what assets do the Charlotte Hornets have in the upcoming 2020 NBA draft? They have a 3rd overall pick in the first round and 2 second-round picks that are 32nd and 52nd overall. For that number 3 pick, LaMelo Ball would be interesting. He would give instant playmaking, as many aren't sure if Rozier and Graham are going to be the long-term solutions for the team. Onyeka Okongwu would address a lot of issues in the paint, and he would be a safe pick. But if I'm Charlotte, I'm not going for safe. I'm going for the guy who gives me the highest potential while at the same time addressing a huge need, and that player is James Wiseman. So again, I'm not the first person to cover James Wiseman with Charlotte, so this shouldn't be a surprise to many of you. And you probably already heard me talk about him in a previous video, so I'll give the basics first, then talk about the fit. So in the 3 games we watched Wiseman play at Memphis, he averaged almost 20 points per game on 76% shooting, almost 11 rebounds per game, and 3 blocks per game. But again, the scouts have concerns that it was only 3 games and it wasn't against great competition. But everyone knows physically you can't just deny a talent like Wiseman. Now let's talk about the fit, because I just talked about why they should acquire Christian Wood. But remember how I said earlier Christian Wood has done a great job playing off other big men. Imagine Christian Wood and James Wiseman playing together. Now that could be scary, even in a league that's becoming positionless. They may be able to adjust to that no problem. James Wiseman is known for his defensive versatility and his mobility for a big man. He has great physical gifts. He's 7'1" with I think a 7'6" wingspan. He's a solid rebounder. He's great in transition play, especially as a lob threat. And he's shown flashes of his gifts on offense. And there may soon be a jump shot to go along with that skill on offense. Now his concerns are he's not the strongest player, but he's only 19. And during this this offseason, pictures and videos have shown where he's made progress in the weight room. Sometimes at Memphis, he tried a little too hard to show the world that he had a capable jump shot, and it led to some bad decision making and shot selection. And as I said earlier, people are worried about the small sample size he had at Memphis, but based on what he did in high school, it hasn't scared a lot of people off. And without a doubt, I think a lot of people understand the situation he had at Memphis. They may question why he didn't return, but based on the work he's been putting in on himself, I think it's justified. So who should the Charlotte Hornets look to as some teams for inspiration from both past and present? One past team that I brought up before, the 2017-2018 New Orleans Pelicans. That was the team that had both Anthony Davis and DeMarcus Cousins. The basketball world was robbed of a Davis-Cousins pairing because that winter, Cousins tore his Achilles and he hasn't been the player since. But they were the most unstoppable athletic duo that I've seen at a front court in a long while. Before Cousins got hurt, the team was third in the league in points per game, 9th in three-point percentage, and 13th in three-pointers made. They had some playmaking with Rondo that even though the Charlotte Hornets don't have that type of playmaker, that's not to say they don't have willing passers. That team wasn't the greatest defensively, but Charlotte right now has shown a willingness to defend as a team. As for a team in today's game, gotta go with the Miami Heat. I've said them multiple times as well. They have a high-scoring, hard-working offense with the ability to shoot the three ball. Everyone gets involved in the playmaking and scoring. And as I said earlier, the Hornets have offensively skilled players, they just haven't put it together yet. The Heat have high performance and skill at the center position with Bam, and if the Hornets draft Wiseman, they would have a center that has great mobility that a lot of centers in the NBA currently don't have. And you can't deny Miami Heat's culture. Everyone holds everyone accountable. As for a team to avoid, I've talked about them before too, the 2017-2018 Minnesota Timberwolves. That was a team that had Levine, Towns, and Wiggins that was starting to show some good promise with that young core. Minnesota rushed the process and made a trade for Jimmy Butler from Chicago, losing Zach LaVine and Chris Dunn, part of their young core. And Jimmy, who was in win now mode, had a hard time dealing with the young players that weren't really showing their ability to work hard. And he got traded again that offseason to Philadelphia, and it stalled the development of the Minnesota Timberwolves, though they have a second chance now after they acquired D'Angelo Russell from Golden State. I use this reference especially because I don't want Charlotte Hornets to make that trade for Russell Westbrook with the rumors that have been circling around. You are not building a team that's supposed to be only contending for an 8th or 7th seed while throwing away the development of your team and its future. So what is my outlook for the Charlotte Hornets next season? I got them 34 wins and 48 losses, the 25th team in the NBA, 11th in the Eastern Conference, and 4th in the Southeast Division. I'm not saying the Hornets are taking a step back, but I am looking at how much more competitive the East is getting. The Hawks are making a rise. The Wizards got John Wall back, and that's within their own division. Chicago's turning their organization around, and they already have pieces. And the Brooklyn Nets just got Kevin Durant. So the team's on the right direction in their development, and if they stay the course, they're going to be very dangerous in the very near future. Well, that concludes episode 9 of the Mr. Basketball Reviews featuring the Charlotte Hornets. If you enjoyed the video, go ahead and like and subscribe to the channel with new videos coming out soon. Leave your comments and feedback in the comment section below, and please continue to spread the word about the channel. If you're about the social media life, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at The Athletic Academic and Twitter at Athledemic. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your support. This is Athletic Academics, and I'll see you next time.